The day Leo went back was the day a part of him died. He stood in the marble foyer of the Vasiliev estate, the same foyer he'd fled 12 years ago, and felt the cold seep through his shoes and into his bones. His mother greeted him with a smile that didn't reach her eyes, his father with a clap on the shoulder that felt like a shackle. Dmitri wasn't there. Dmitri was never there when it mattered, always lurking in the shadows, waiting. Sarah had begged him not to go. She'd stood in their little living room, her hazel eyes swollen from crying, and she'd said, "If you go back, you'll become them. You won't be my Leo anymore." And he'd held her face in his hands, those warm brown eyes filled with a desperate kind of love, and he'd promised her, "I'm not going back to become them. I'm going back to destroy them. For us. For our future. I need you to trust me." She'd nodded because she loved him, because she wanted to believe him, because the alternative was watching the man she loved walk into a lion's den and never come out. She was wrong to trust him. They both were. The first month was a masterclass in deception. Leo played the prodigal son, returned, and redeemed. He sat through board meetings with a smile plastered on his face while his father negotiated deals that made his skin crawl. He dined with his mother, listening to her catalog the inadequacies of every person who wasn't them. He learned to laugh at Dmitri's jokes about people who'd gotten in their way, people who'd had accidents, people who'd simply disappeared. All the while, he was building his case. Every file, every encrypted document, every whispered conversation with the few loyal staff who remembered the boy he used to be, it all went into a digital vault that only he could access. He learned about the new politician they'd bought, a charismatic senator named William Cross, who'd sailed into office on a wave of reform promises while secretly funneling Vasiliev money through a network of shell companies. In exchange, Cross was pushing legislation that would open protected lands for Vasiliev mining operations, lands that belonged to indigenous communities who'd lived there for centuries. The deal was worth billions. The human cost was incalculable. But the deeper Leo dug, the worse it got. It wasn't just bribes and backroom deals. It was blackmail, extortion, and worse. People who opposed them didn't just lose their jobs, they lost their families, their reputations, sometimes their lives. And always, the pattern was the same. Someone close to them would vanish, and then the opposition would crumble. Leo didn't make the connection. Not yet. He was too focused on the paper trail, on the digital evidence, on building a case so airtight that even his family's legion of lawyers couldn't poke holes in it. He barely slept. He barely ate. He called Sarah every night, whispering promises into the phone, telling her it was almost over, that soon they'd be free. And then, one night, she didn't answer. He called again, straight to voicemail, again. His heart started to pound, a primal rhythm of fear he hadn't felt since he was 22 years old, running through the dark with his brother's men on his heels. He drove to the house. The door was unlocked. The lights were on. Her phone was on the kitchen counter, next to a half-empty glass of water and a plate with an uneaten piece of toast. It looked like she'd just stepped out. But Sarah never left her phone. Never. Leo stood in their kitchen, in the house they'd made a home, and he felt the world tilt beneath him. He knew, with a certainty that turned his blood to ice, who was responsible. He just didn't want to believe it. 3 days. 72 hours of nothing. Leo tore the city apart, using resources he'd never admitted he had: private investigators, former intelligence operatives, a network of people who owed him favors from a life he'd tried to bury. He found nothing. No traces. No witnesses, no demands, just silence. His family watched him unravel with varying degrees of amusement. His father offered platitudes. His mother offered cold comfort wrapped in barbed wire. Perhaps she simply left you. Women like that, they're not built for our world. She probably took one look at the life you were offering and ran. And Dmitri just smiled. That smile told Leo everything he needed to know. On the 4th day, Leo was in his childhood bedroom, a suite of rooms he'd converted into a command center, when a soft knock came at the door. It was Elena, the housekeeper who'd been with the family since before he was born. She was the only person in this entire poison mansion who'd ever shown him genuine kindness. She'd bandaged his scraped knees, smuggled him extra desserts, held him when he cried after his grandmother died. She was the closest thing to a mother he'd ever really had. She didn't meet his eyes. She just pressed a piece of paper into his hand and whispered, "She never left, Alexandros. She's been here the whole time. I'm so sorry." Then she was gone, shuffling down the hallway like a ghost. Leo unfolded the paper. It was a hand-drawn map, crude but clear, showing a section of the mansion's lower levels he'd never accessed. There was a door marked, a door that led down. Down. He remembered now. Years ago, when he was a teenager, there'd been months of construction noise, trucks coming and going, his father's vague explanations about renovations. He'd been too wrapped up in his own misery to question it, too young to understand what his family was capable of. He didn't wait. He didn't plan. He grabbed the small team of security. He'd hired men he trusted, men who weren't on the family payroll, and he moved. The mansion at night was a different beast. Shadows pooled in corners, and every creak of the floorboards sounded like a warning. Leo led his team through the kitchen, through the service corridors, down staircases that hadn't been used in decades. The air grew colder, damper. The walls changed from marble to concrete. They found the door. It was steel, industrial, with an electronic keypad that looked out of place among the old stone. One of Leo's men, a former Special Forces operator named Marcus, made short work of it. The door swung open on silent hinges, revealing a staircase that descended into absolute blackness. The first shot came from nowhere. One of Leo's men went down, clutching his shoulder. Then another. The staircase erupted into chaos, muzzle flashes, the deafening roar of gunfire, the acrid smell of cordite. Leo pressed himself against the wall, returning fire, moving forward. He'd trained for this, once, in another life. His father had insisted all his sons know how to fight. He'd never imagined using those skills to storm his own home. It was a scene straight out of a nightmare. Bodies fell. Men screamed. Leo moved through it all with a cold, mechanical precision. His only thought a single word, repeating in his skull. Sarah. 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 At the bottom of the stairs, a corridor stretched before them, lined with doors. Heavy doors. Industrial doors with small viewing slots and heavy locks. Leo's blood ran cold. He'd seen places like this in files, in intelligence briefings, in the darkest corners of his family's history. He'd never imagined they were real. They cleared the corridor room by room. Most were empty. Some held evidence documents, recording equipment, things Leo couldn't process right now. And then, at the end of the hall, a door with a single light bulb visible through the slot. Leo looked through. She was curled on a mattress on the floor, facing away from him. She was so thin, so pale. Her beautiful hair, the hair he'd run his fingers through 1,000 times, was matted and dull. The room stank of fear and despair and human waste. He wrenched the door open. The sound made her flinch, curl tighter, press herself against the wall like an animal expecting a blow. Sarah. His voice broke on her name. It came out as a whisper, a prayer, a sob. She didn't move, didn't turn, just stayed there, trembling, waiting for the next cruelty. Leo crossed the room in 2 steps and dropped to his knees beside her. He reached out, terrified to touch her, terrified she'd shatter. His hand hovered over her shoulder, and he tried again. Sarah, it's me. It's Leo. I'm here. I'm so sorry. I'm here. She turned then, slowly, like someone waking from a nightmare. Her eyes were hollow, ringed with dark circles. But when they focused on his face, something flickered. Recognition, disbelief, a fragile, trembling hope. Leo? Her voice was a rasp, barely audible. You're not real. You're not real. She said you'd never come. She said you forgot about me. He gathered her into his arms, so gently, so carefully, like she was made of glass. She weighed nothing. She weighed less than nothing. She felt like a ghost in his embrace, and he held her, and he wept, great heaving sobs that shook his entire body. I'm real, he choked out. I'm here. I've got you. I've got you. I'm never letting you go again. She clung to him then, her thin arms wrapping around his neck, and she cried. They cried together, 2 broken people in a concrete tomb, holding each other like the world was ending. And then, against his ear, she whispered something that made his blood freeze. Leo, I can hear them. Other women, crying. At night, when it's quiet, I can hear them. I don't know where they are. I couldn't find them. But they're here. They're all here. Leo pulled back, staring at her face. The horror in her eyes wasn't just for herself. It was for them. For the strangers whose voices she'd heard through the concrete walls. He turned to the door, where Marcus stood waiting, his face a mask of controlled fury. Check every room, Leo said, his voice low and deadly. Every single one. They found 7 of them. 7 women, ranging in age from early 20s to late 40s. Some had been there for weeks. One had been there for nearly a year. They were daughters, sisters, mothers, loved ones of people who'd opposed the Vasiliev empire, people who'd threatened deals, people who'd refused to sell, people who'd tried to expose the truth. The women were emaciated, traumatized, barely clinging to sanity. They'd been held in conditions that would make a maximum security prison look like a five-star hotel. They'd been fed just enough to survive. They'd been given buckets for waste and thin blankets against the cold. And they'd been told, over and over, that no one was coming for them, that they'd been forgotten, that this was their life now. Sarah, it turned out, was the lucky one. She'd only been there for 11 days. The others had been there much, much longer. Leo stood in the corridor, surrounded by the evidence of his family's evil, and he felt something inside him snap. The last shred of doubt, the last whisper of familial loyalty, the last thread connecting him to the people who'd raised him, it all burned away in an instant. He pulled out his phone. He made 2 calls. The first was to the most trusted investigative journalist in the country, a woman named Maya Okonkwo, who'd been trying to bring down the Vasiliev empire for a decade. She'd never had enough proof. Now, she would have more than she could ever use. The second call was to his lawyer, a pit bull of a man named David Chen, who'd helped Leo build his secret fortune and had been waiting for this day for years. "David," Leo said, his voice flat and cold as steel. "It's time. Release everything. Every file, every document, every recording. Send it to Maya Okonkwo at the Chronicle and tell her to expect company. There are witnesses now, 7 of them. They'll testify." Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like, share, and follow for more billionaire stories. The package that arrived at Maya's apartment the next morning was the story of the decade. No, the century. It contained proof of bribes to Senator William Cross totaling $47 million, laundered through a network of shell companies in the Cayman Islands, Switzerland, and Dubai. It contained recordings of Dmitry discussing the disposal of a journalist who'd gotten too close to the truth. The man had been found dead of an accidental overdose 3 days later. It contained financial documents showing that Cross had been paying Vasiliev Industries for consulting fees that coincided exactly with every favorable vote he'd cast. But the worst part, the part that made Maya's hand shake as she read, was how they were able to make people disappear. The 7 women found in a bunker beneath one of the most famous mansions in Europe. Their testimonies, recorded on Leo's phone, describing years of captivity. Their families, who'd been told they'd run away, who'd given up hope, who'd buried empty coffins and mourned ghosts. The Vasiliev empire didn't just break, it exploded. By noon, the story was global. By evening, warrants were issued. Senator Cross was arrested at a fundraiser, his face frozen in shock as federal agents led him away in handcuffs. Dmitry tried to flee, but his private jet was stopped on the tarmac. His father suffered a massive heart attack when the news broke and was rushed to the hospital under police guard. And his mother, Lady Cordelia Vasiliev, sat in her drawing room, sipping tea, as if the world outside wasn't collapsing. She was still there when Leo walked in. "You," she said, setting down her cup with exquisite precision. "I should have known. I told your father to deal with you years ago, but he was always soft where you were concerned. Too soft, too sentimental." Leo stood before her, looking down at this woman who'd given birth to him, who'd raised him, who'd never once shown him a moment of genuine love. Behind him, Marcus and his team waited in the doorway. "You kept her in a hole," Leo said, his voice quiet. "You fed her 2 sandwiches a day and told her she was nothing. You went down there, day after day, just to torture her. Just to make her feel small." Cordelia smiled. It was the same smile she'd worn her entire life, cold, superior, utterly unbothered. "She is nothing, Alexander. She was always nothing. A shop girl from nowhere with her thrift store clothes and her common little voice. Did you really think I would let you ruin our family for that?" "Our family?" Leo repeated. "You mean the family that makes people disappear? The family that takes out journalists? The family that's been running a criminal enterprise for decades behind a veneer of respectability? And for the last time, Mother, I have changed my name. It's Leo now." "We did what needed to be done," Cordelia said, waving a hand dismissively. "That's what power is, Alexander. And that is your name, not this Leo. Doing what needs to be done so the rest of them can sleep soundly at night. Your precious Sarah, sleeping in her little house with her little job and her little life, she sleeps soundly because people like us keep the world from tearing itself apart." Leo laughed. It wasn't a happy sound. It was the laugh of a man who'd finally seen the monster for what it was and found it pathetically small. Is that what you told yourself? When you went down there? When you watched her cry? When you told her I'd forgotten her, was that doing what needs to be done? Cordelia's mask slipped. Just for a moment. Something flickered in her eyes. Rage, maybe, or fear. The senator, Leo continued, reaching into his jacket pocket. William Cross, handsome man, married of course, but that never stopped you, did it? You've been having an affair with him for 3 years. Did you think no one knew? For the first time, Cordelia's composure cracked. Her hand tightened on her teacup. You gave him money, Leo said, pulling out a sheaf of documents. Millions of dollars. But here's the interesting part. The money didn't come from the family accounts. It came from a separate fund, a fund connected to a certain investment manager who's currently under federal investigation for running the largest Ponzi scheme in a decade. Cordelia's face went white. That's right, Mother. Your lover's money came from a Ponzi scheme. And you knew it. You helped him hide it. You're not just an accessory to his crimes. You're a co-conspirator. Racketeering, money laundering, fraud, the list goes on. By the time the prosecutors are done with you, you'll be old. If you ever get out at all. The teacup shattered as it hit the floor. Cordelia stood, her aristocratic mask crumbling into something raw and ugly. You can't do this, she hissed. I'm your mother. Leo looked at her for a long moment. He saw the woman who'd never hugged him, never kissed him, never told him she loved him. He saw the woman who'd sent him to boarding school at 7 because he was in the way. He saw the woman who'd smiled when his brother tried to kill him. He saw the woman who'd kept the love of his life in a concrete box and tormented her for sport. You stopped being my mother, he said quietly. A long time ago. Take her. Marcus stepped forward. Cordelia screamed, lunging for Leo, her carefully manicured nails raking toward his face. He caught her wrists, held her for a moment, looked into her eyes. Sarah sends her regards, he said. She wanted me to tell you that she's not nothing. She never was. And neither were any of the women you kept in that hole. He released her wrists and stepped back. Marcus and his team moved in, and Cordelia Vasiliev, the grande dame of one of Europe's most powerful families, was led away in handcuffs, still screaming. 3 months later, Leo stood on the balcony of a small apartment in a city where no one knew his name. Below, the streets hummed with ordinary life, people going to work, children playing, couples holding hands. It was the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen. Behind him, Sarah emerged from the bedroom. She was still thin, still pale, still waking from nightmares that left her gasping and crying in the dark. But she was here, she was alive. And when she looked at him, there was still love in her eyes. They're all pleading guilty, he said, not turning around. Dmitri first, then my father, once they let him out of the hospital, even Cross. The only one fighting is my mother. She still thinks she can win. Sarah came to stand beside him, wrapping her arms around his waist and pressing her face into his back. Can she? No, he turned, pulling her into his arms. She can't. The evidence is too strong. The witnesses are too many. She's going away for a very long time. Sarah was quiet for a moment. Then, softly, the other women, the ones from the bunker, I've been talking to them. We're starting a foundation for victims like me. We want to use the money, your money, to help people like us. Leo looked down at her, at this woman who'd been through hell and come out the other side, still thinking of others, still trying to make the world better. His heart swelled with a love so fierce it almost hurt. Not my money, he said. Our money. Everything I have is ours. Everything I am is yours. If you want to start a foundation, we start a foundation. If you want to burn it all and start over, we burn it. Whatever you want, Sarah, as long as I'm with you. She looked up at him, and for the first time in months, she smiled. It was small and fragile and trembling, but it was real. I want to go get ice cream, she said. The cheap kind, from that place on the corner, with sprinkles. Leo laughed, the sound surprising them both. Ice cream with sprinkles. That's what you want? That's what I want. He kissed her forehead, then her nose, then her lips soft and gentle and full of promise. Ice cream with sprinkles it is. They walked out of the apartment together, hand in hand, two people who'd survived the impossible and found each other on the other side. Behind them, the television played the news. The Vasiliev empire finally fallen. The trials about to begin. The scandal that would be talked about for generations. But they didn't watch. They had better things to do. They had a life to live. Thanks for watching. Did you enjoy this billionaire story? Well, be sure to subscribe for more stories coming soon.